Well, according to Carl Sagan, in his 1997 book, The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. I don't know if any of you, I have not read it, so I don't know if any of you have. I don't know if it's any good. He outlines that there are naive questions, tedious questions, ill-phrased questions, and questions put after inadequate self-criticism. But every question is a cry to understand the world. There is no such thing as a dumb question. That part should be familiar. A Dear Abby column in the Milwaukee Sentinel said, "There is no such thing as a stupid question if it is sincere. Better to ask and risk appearing stupid than to continue on your ignorant way and make a stupid mistake." Okay. In his book, Presentation Skills That Will Take You to the Top, executive coach Jerry Weisman said that within the business world, this saying about there being no dumb questions holds true, and he escalates it and adds, a question might be uninformed, tangential, or seemingly irrelevant, but whether the presenter perceives it to be stupid or not, every audience member has every right to ask any sort of question. So, there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? But what if there are stupid questions, actually? What if they do exist? Or, okay, let me put it differently. What if there are bad questions? Like the nefarious loaded question, a trick question, which presupposes at least one unverified assumption that the person being questioned is likely to disagree with. For example, when did you stop mistreating your pet? Makes a loaded assumption that you have in fact been mistreating your pet. In gotcha journalism, loaded questions are frequently used by reporters who interview people in a way that causes them to unintentionally make negative statements that are damaging to their reputation or credibility. There are also leading questions that are phrased in a way that suggests that a certain answer should be given in response. So, for example, don't you agree that the evidence in this case is quite conclusive? Another kind of bad question are ones that have forced choice answers, questions that are phrased in a way that pushes the person being questioned to respond using only a limited set of options or some kind of false dichotomy, yes or no, this or that, X or Y. So for example, do you support the actions of your favorite politician, yes or no? Right? There's no winning that. Sometimes a bad question can encompass many of these traits. Teacher, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? It's loaded, leading, and forces limited choices. It's a trifecta. You can't get much better than that unless you're listening to Joe Rogan or watching Fox News. When it comes to matters of faith, sometimes there are very bad questions. Questions that are formed by assumptions, questions that lead us to judgment or isolation. When Jesus and his entourage encounter a blind man along the way, the disciples, the ones you'd think would know better, the disciples immediately ask, "Teacher, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind?" It makes the sweeping assumption that illness and disability are the result of sin. They are not. Furthermore, it assumes that the man deserved to be born blind because of sin. This is also inaccurate. And it assumes that physical blindness is somehow a failure on the part of a human being. Also untrue. Teacher, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? It's a mess, the whole thing, right out of the gate. The man is being questioned, and then his parents are being questioned because they don't believe him, but clearly he's of age, so that's fun for agency. They go back and ask the man again. One of my favorite parts is he says, I've already answered you. Do you need me to give you the answer again? Because it was not good enough for them. It just doesn't stop. Nobody's satisfied with the answer. I once was blind, but now I see. It is a healing, but how? And why? And even more insidiously, should he have been? Through the lens of a healing, this passage is a roadmap outlining how humanity always wants to be sure and secure about the world. The crowd is certain that there must be a cause. That is, it must be someone's fault that explains the effect, God's judgment, in their case, at play. But when the effect is made known, they refuse to believe the cause that has been given credit. We want to believe, but only on our terms. Go back and read the chapter. Everyone asking questions wants answers on their terms. The disciples' first reaction is to debate the blindness and not deal at all with the person, intellectualizing and theologizing outside of seeing the created being right in front of them. It led them to ask the wrong questions. Rather than ask, how can we heal? How can we help? They ask, whose fault is it? We do the same thing today. We do the same thing today when suffering, pain, and affliction are revealed right before us. Empathetic inquiry is set aside, and we rush to diagnose and problem solve before we even know the nature and depth of the problem we are trying to address, or if it's a problem at all. We too easily view one another through a one-dimensional lens, so much that all we can do is start down the path towards misplaced questions and actions based on mistaken and often loaded assumptions. These kinds of problematic assumptions and follow-up questions are littered throughout our news sources still today, and certainly all over our social media feeds. We hear people say things like, well, they must be poor because of X, so we will solve X by doing Y. Or, she must be incarcerated because, or the reason they're being deported must be because, or he must be experiencing mental health issues because, and on and on and on. We regularly turn genuine struggles of the human condition into formulas of cause and effect, which then all gets warped up into the idea that if something bad is happening to us, it must be because God has determined that we deserve it. Hogwash, which I think Jesus said, but the gospel writer thought better than to include it. That's fine. I know that our Lenten series has focused on the importance of asking questions, so I'm not disparaging that at all. Asking questions fuels faith. It grows it. Not asking questions can stagnate our spiritual development, and our faith can atrophy. I bristle when people say to me that they want to have a childlike faith. First of all, spend time around children, and you might notice that they are relentless in asking questions. Second, we encourage them to do so, don't we? In the vast majority of cases, we want them to keep asking and to stay curious, because curiosity helps them to grow and develop and learn. Kids want to know. They want to ask. They want to investigate and learn, and then they want to talk about what they've learned. This is celebrated in childhood, And it ought to be celebrated in adulthood too. And it certainly ought to be celebrated in faith communities, regardless of a person's age and stage. Our preparatory praise throughout Lent, the land of the seeking, is not so much, if you've noticed, a praise to God, but a call from one disciple to another. We're singing almost to each other, inviting one another to do the work of wondering and questioning. Draw a map without borders and see where you go. Under the cover of night, call a question a home. Both lines hearkening back to the woman at the well in Samaria and Nicodemus, who came to Jesus full of questions while the world slept. Wondering and seeking and questioning are good things. The caution in today's story from John chapter 9, the caution concerns what happens when questions are based on false assumptions. John 9 calls into the question the old saying that there are no dumb questions. Well, there can be bad questions. What do we do when we get trapped in false assumptions? Why do we do that? Because we still do it. Theologian and author Brian McLaren has been hosting a podcast for a number of years now called Learning How to See. Highly recommend. And this past week, he interviewed author, teacher, and Episcopal priest Barbara Brown Taylor on the topic of staying loyal to reality, meaning acknowledging what is right in front of us and employing the best available data in our consideration thereof. Last Sunday, I mentioned that I have joined a local ministerial made up of United and Anglican clergy. Well, it was until now. Now it's got some Presbyterians on it, so it's better. Together, we've been discussing homelessness in our region and considering possible steps to effect change in an immediate as well as a long-term sense. Unfortunately, a regular side topic in our conversations has been the impending conflict with municipal and regional councillors who refuse, for various reasons, to even admit that homelessness is a problem in Halton, especially in Oakville. One councillor has asked, quote, "Where are these people coming from? Hamilton or Mississauga?" Right? I could end the sermon there. You've got enough to chew on, don't you? I'm not going to end it there, but I could. No, sir, they are locals. By the way, what a spectacularly loaded question, based on the assumption that Halton doesn't generate its own homeless population. They are born and raised. Their school friends and relatives are still in the area. Ask anyone involved in food security and how the need has grown exponentially in the last few years, even months. As an aside, if you are considering increasing or starting a regular donation to our Good Samaritan Fund here at Knox, I can assure you we are burning through it, buying grocery gift cards. People are hungry and they cannot afford food. This is our reality. And while it is uncomfortable, we are invited to be loyal to it. That is, to look it in the eyes rather than try to sweep it under the carpet. Why do we resist loyalty to reality? Why is it risky to do so? Because it then forces us to consider the parts of our reality which have a hand in perpetuating unjust systems. It forces us to look at ourselves and wonder how we might be contributing to the problem. And more than that, and I think the most important, Being loyal to reality means granting the other person dignity and fullness of humanity rather than just seeing them as a charity case. To truly see them, not just their conditions. That is a gift. And I believe, along with Brian McLaren and Barbara Brown Taylor, that it is the most faithful way to live in the world. Who sinned that this man was born blind, him or his parents? Oh. What would it look like to stay loyal to reality? To resist the urge to cast blame, to insist on there being a cause and effect? What it would look like to not immediately shut the eyes of our hearts to the answer when it doesn't suit our narrative? That's hard work. It's getting uncomfortable in here. You need to, everyone take a deep breath, for my sake. Brian McLaren shares that in the chapter of his book, Should I Stay Christian? He writes, loyalty to reality doesn't feel like certainty. It feels more like humility. It feels more like awe and wonder, curiosity, patient attentiveness. There is something a lot of us are thinking a lot of lately, he says, about the allure of certainty, the comfort of certainty. And yet the downsides of certainty, because one thing that's very obvious if we look around, people can be 100% certain of something and still be wrong. And they can be uncertain, and yet reality is going to be what it's going to be, with or without our certainty. And this is an experience I think many of us in the church have, any religious institution really, but I'll just pick on us because we're here. It's an issue we have because we want to be loyal to reality, but we also want to be loyal to our family, our religious community, our nation, or whatever. We want to be loyal to the people around us, to our tribe or group, but what happens when the belief system of the tribe or group or family is out of sync with reality? I think some of us might be tempted to then just say, I guess I'll sacrifice loyalty to my neighbor for loyalty to my understanding of reality. It's a much harder thing to try to stay loyal to my neighbor and to reality. Think of broken families where family dinners are a difficult thing to have because people have different views of what is happening in the world, what's happening in their own homes, their own relationships, the choices they're making, the stances they're taking. Sometimes it just feels easier to give in to the narrative of your collective than to stand firm and to stand loyal to what's actually happening. Where are these people coming from? Hamilton or Mississauga? No, they're coming from next door. And they're coming from inside your own home. How can I learn to see uncomfortable truths that I wish were not true? And that's what John chapter 9 is about. It's about the disciples and the crowd and the Pharisees and the family of the blind man not being able to stand in the discomfort that what they were seeing and hearing and experiencing did not align with how they understood reality to work. So, the question I leave with you, a few questions. I hope they aren't loaded. How might we start asking better questions? Questions rooted in curiosity and openness, rather than loaded with false assumptions. There are a lot of things we do not have the answers to, and God is more mysterious than we could ever understand. That doesn't mean we stop asking questions, but it does mean that we can ask better questions. And so your homework is to consider what assumptions you have made about other people or other groups in the community. What are examples of bad questions you might have asked? And how can you ask them better? Go back and read John chapter 9. See if you can formulate better questions. And then see if you can stand even in the discomfort and rejoice with the man who once was blind, but now he can see. To God be all the glory. Amen.